Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with you for the 189th, count them, 189 Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom calls. We are in the midst, of course, of a incredibly tight and exciting nail-biter election. We are going to be continuing right to the very end with our till November, what is it this year, 8th, 7th, 6th? I think it's the 6th election with focusing on issues of election protection and get out the vote and protecting our democracy. And at the same time, we will be talking about renewable energy and saving the planet, especially solar, with a new focus on solarizing the upcoming 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, where it is today a mere 110 degrees in the shade, if there is any shade. Dr. Nancy, you can report directly from us on that. How hot is it in Los Angeles today? Are you about to keel over? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, go ahead. Nancy is in Santa Monica. At least you're near the ocean, which is usually a little cooler than the rest of the city.
Right. And until this week, it didn't get above 83. And now it's well into the 90s. And I'm just sensitive to it. I can't handle it. I just wrote a big deal for our neighborhood vlog about 12 ways to stay cool. And I'm not going outside.
Oh, well, you're not far from the ocean, but I understand the sharks are much hungrier when the water is warm. So be very careful. But today we're going to have Alan Minsky, I believe, from Progressive Democrats of America. We're going to be joined by KENNY BRUNO, my former my buddy, formerly. Well, we're still with Greenpeace, actually. We're both voting members. I've been with Greenpeace since 1991. Also going to be joined by State Senator Mike Hirsch. Can you pronounce the state senator's name for us?
Yes, it's Senator Walz.
Jeffrey Walz Stryker, and Ray McClellan is going to give us the down and dirty report from Atlanta, from Georgia, where the shenanigans with election protection are incredibly complicated and are really, really critical. So Ray is going to give us a report. We may hear from Lori Grace in Hawaii. And then the second hour, starting at 6 o'clock Eastern time, we're going to hear from Andrea Miller, the great Andrea Miller, who is doing tremendous work on Get Out the Vote with postcards. If you are interested in doing Get Out the Vote postcards, Andrea Miller is the place to go for the Center for Common Ground. You can look it up now, but as I say, it's 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific. Andrea Miller will be with us. We're joined now by Alan Minsky, the only St. Louis Cardinal fan I've ever met, who is the leading light at the Progressive Democrats of America. Alan, you were going to give us, are you driving? You're not allowed to drive on this. The last thing we wanted, you can sit in a car, but you can't be moving. So tell us, Alan, you wanted to give us a quick report. You are muted. Let's get you unmuted. Hold on, bro. Alan and I are still waiting to get our sports show at KPFK, where I will reveal the greatest of all time in football, baseball, and basketball. But in the meantime, Alan, did we get you unmuted? Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. What is it? You're gonna reveal the greatest what?
The greatest of all time, with indisputable. I'm going to give the indisputable case for the greatest of all time for football, the NFL, baseball, and the NBA. So that awaits our show. But in the meantime, you're gonna give us a full report on PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, and your Get Out the Vote efforts.
Well, actually, I'd love it to be a little bit of a dialogue too. Maybe you and I, Harvey, can back and forth a bit, because I do want to know what the sentiment on this call is around the kind of work that Greg Palast has been doing, particularly around the film Vigilantes, and what I really am interested in knowing from this group pertaining to the release. And I'd love to be able to come on just again for 5 or 10 minutes, not long, next week, because by next week, the 2024 voterscalendar.org will be live. That is the project that Mimi Kennedy inspired with Steve, I believe his name's Rosenfeld. Maybe
Yes.
he's even from 2020. Well, we reproduced it for 2024. And this time, however, we really want to use it as an instrument through PDA, but also through GREEP. When it is live, maybe next week if I can come back on, because it will be live.
Yes,
We're
and
all the way
next
through-
week, Alan, next week, we will have Greg Palast talking about his film Vigilantes.
Great. Well, I saw Greg's film last night with Tom Hartman and a bunch of people. Sorry, I got better shade. I am now parked again, Harvey. And
Good.
by the way, it's 100 degrees here, folks. So I know environmental is one of the E's in this group. And we all have to be honest about the fact that we ain't doing anything to address anthropogenic climate change that's adequate for what needs to be done. And Harvey with Solartopia and that vision is something that we have to all be championing. But anyway, PDA, as people probably know, we had our probably most successful event during my tenure as executive director, which was the convention we had in Chicago called Progressive Central. We are going to be re-releasing all of the videos from it. In particular, after the election, we are going to be releasing them because we're doing the editing now beforehand. And but the point being with that stuff is that if it is a Harris administration, we are going to be reminding them that the progressive agenda is what the American public wants. Here is the articulation of that agenda from 60 participants to the conference, including 14 members of the Progressive Caucus, 2 U.S. senators, Bernie Sanders giving the keynote speech. And so we're going to be doing that. That's the update on PDA. But we will be highlighting it then because we do feel that Donald Trump has to be defeated. And can you hear me, Harvey? Yeah?
Yes, I will say we are nonpartisan officially on these calls, but I will tell you that if Donald Trump wins the election, we will be broadcasting from Costa Rica or any other country that has non-extradition treaties.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and then voters calendar, by the way, is completely nonpartisan. It is nothing but real information. And that's really what I wanted to come on the call about. People can go to the website 2024 with the numbers 2024 voters with an S calendar.org, and they will find a prototype of what it is. It's basically a United States map broken up into 50 states plus the District of Columbia. You click on any of them, and then you'll see all the information. Now, the only link that's live on the front page right now is Alabama, because we are not going to be uploading any of the information for 2024 until we do it en masse, because this kind of website needs to be bulletproof. You cannot be putting up false information. So we are all the way through to Pennsylvania in the states that we have completed. Thank you. If you click on Alabama, you'll see the 2020 page. It's the only one that goes through, and this is what the kind of information we'll have. However, this time around, in states where there is clear targeting and scrubbing of voter rolls, we want to have more on this website this time than last time. We still want nothing but accurate information, but we want to be able to make clear, and I know that Palast has a site that does this, and I hopefully will be working in tandem with Center for Common Ground, and we'll be working in tandem with all of the progressive organizations that PDA is now coordinated with, which is pretty much all of them, to get the information out, to get to people, particularly in communities that are targeted, to have their names be scrubbed from the voting rolls. And there's
go ahead, welcome, by the way, Alan, let me just interrupt very briefly. I want to welcome Kenny Bruno, who's our next presenter, onto the call with us. And Kenny, meet Alan MINSKY. You guys should know each other. And Alan, we're going to coordinate your website with ours. We have two, of course, the U.S. Grassroots, and then we also have the grassrootsep.org. So your mapping will be part of it. And Kenny Bruno, you're in New York, but you should be in touch with Alan MINSKY, and I'll put you there. And also we're joined by Ray McClendon, who's going to follow Kenny. Go ahead, Alan. And you will be back, Alan. You'll come back with us. You'll come back with us next week. With
Right, and I'm gonna mute myself after this and listen in for quite a while. probably be gone by the time Erica gets on. Andrea gets on. But I will say this, though. We have to be earnest, all of us. We can identify what is being done to try to deny people the franchise. We have to be very, very clear-headed in our thinking over the next 6 weeks about how we negate this reactionary effort to steal the right of people to vote in this country, and what it will take to raise consciousness enough that people bring to the polls the information by going in advance and finding their voter registration status, finding what their signature looked like previously so they can match their signatures now, and of course, tragically, bring the necessary information they need to the polls in order to be allowed to vote in the states that now demand such. And so this is going to be huge. And, you know, let me just leave with this. This is nonpartisan. Probably a lot of people on the call fashion themselves to be of the so-called political left. And there's no more political left position than having real, full, absolute, universal enfranchisement. Because after all, the term comes from the French Revolution, and it didn't refer to the economic distribution of economic power. There was a subtext of that, but it referred to who got to have a say in who ran the society. This is the most core and radical position we can have to defend everybody's right to have a say in the running of our society. And this group is full of heroes. It really is full of heroes. And I think this group is probably a more concentrated group that understands that as well as anybody in the country. We're honored to work with you. And I'll be back next week. And that website, by that time, will have all 51 pages up. And we will probably ask if people can troubleshoot them, even though they've already been troubleshot. We want to keep doing it because obviously everybody here will know the details for their state, and they should take their state, look at it, make sure it's all right and good to go. And we just look forward to working closely with everybody over the next 2 months because it's go time on this issue now, and our democracy is in the balance. So
couldn't be better said. Alan Minsky is executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, former program director at KPFK, got our radio show going. And I want to introduce you now. Alan, you can stick with us. I've got a couple hands, but if you don't mind waiting, Carla and Ruth, I want to go straight to Kenny Bruno. His presentation and the article he just authored in Truth Out, and Steve, I sent you the link. If you want to put it in the chat, that would be great. Is very germane, right on target to this. And plus, I got to give him the highest possible recommendation, which is that he's been with Greenpeace for many, many years. Kenny, come on down. You're unmuted. We have 50, oh my God, we have about 60 people on the call with us. Kenny, can you tell us about your article and your message? And then we'll go to Ray McClendon in Georgia. But please, Kenny Bruno.
Yes, and just sound check here. You hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm not an election expert. I observe these things pretty closely as a layperson. And so when I discovered a path that I think nobody else had written about for the election to be stolen, a potential path, I thought, listen, I'm going to lay it out there because if I can think of it, they can think of it. I'm not saying it's the most likely scenario. I'm not saying that other scenarios shouldn't be prepared for, but it's just one scenario that just shows in some ways how vulnerable our system is. A lot of us thought from third grade that we had all these checks and balances and a sturdy democracy, but actually it turns out that it's kind of a house of cards. But anyway, let me explain specifically what I wrote about. And apologies if any of you go to the article for the hideous photo. That's the editor's choice, not mine. As a lot of you will know, the editor chooses the title of the article and the photo, so don't hold me responsible for that. And don't keep it on the screen too long either. I don't think people need to see that anymore. Anyway, the original title of this article, my title, which the editors didn't choose, was Down Ballot or Bust. And the reason in a general way is that as of January 3rd at noon, the Republicans will hold two very important levers of power, which is the Supreme Court and the House of Representatives. And whether they hold the House after noon on January 3rd is the question that my article explores. And here's what I'm talking about. We have to win the election on November 5th, and everybody's talking about that most of all. But as we know, these aren't normal elections anymore. This is elections where one side is willing to do anything, steal, cheat, lie, threaten violence, or even commit violence to win. So after November 5th, there's going to be a series of milestones, as everybody now remembers from 2020. A week or so later, the count will happen. We have to win the count. Then in December, there's certifications at the state level, and we have to win those. And then there's the congressional certification on January 6th. Now, the House of Representatives has the key role here in certifying the election. If there's a majority of Democrats and they elect a Democratic speaker, which would presumably be Hakeem Jeffries on January 3rd, then on January 6th, we could probably squeak out a certification. And it's likely that if Harris wins the Electoral College, that her coattails will bring a slim majority in Congress. But what if, and I admit that these scenarios have a lot of what ifs in them, but I think, again, it behooves us to think about all the ways that this could go down. What if prior to January 3rd, in red states, governors or secretaries of state aligned with MAGA declined to certify some House races because they were very close? Let's say they have an under 1% margin and the loser challenges it, and the governor or secretary of state, depending on which state, that's the certifying entity, declines to certify them. Then you get to January 3rd, and you might have, instead of a slim Democratic majority, you might have a slim Republican majority with a few vacant seats, or you could even have a tie. You could have 217 of each in the House and one vacant seat. And remember, if Congress does not certify the election, that is to say, if no one is deemed having 270 electoral votes, then it goes to a contingent election, meaning that each state gets one vote no matter how many seats it has. And the Republicans are very likely to have a majority of majority Republican seats, even if it's only 26. Or even if it's 25 and some one or two states are split. So you could have a contingent election where the president is selected by Congress if no one gets 270 electoral votes. So in the meantime, so one other point I want to make is that in the meantime, a lot of these questions will go to courts. And I think there's a complacency, even in our community a little bit, maybe not this community on this call right now. This might be the most, sort of nervous and skeptical, rightly so, community about election theft. But there's complacency in general about the courts because last time in 2020, all of these, almost all the decisions rejected the election deniers. But now we've seen a very emboldened Supreme Court that has become clearly partisan, most clearly with the outrageous immunity decision. Clearly, they're trying to, they have a political agenda, and they've even said, or at least one has said, one side is going to win this. And Sam Alito said one side is going to win this, and there's no doubt which side he's on. So we can't really feel good about what would happen if any decision about how to count the votes and how to certify these, the states or the congressional elections, we can't feel good if those end up at the Supreme Court. And so I think I'm not saying this is the most likely scenario, but we could see a lot of chaos between January 3rd and January 6th. And I just think that we need to be prepared for that. We need to prepare the media for that. We need to prepare litigators for that, and the public too, because when all this kind of thing happens, it's better to be able to say, oh, here comes the BS that we expected, rather than be shocked and not know what to do. And I want to also say, and this is a point for discussion, Harvey, we don't want to make it so scary that people think, oh, there's nothing we can do to stop this from being stolen. In fact, we want to motivate people more. We don't want to demotivate people by saying there's no way to stop this. But we do want to talk about it in a way that will energize people even more to defend the democracy that we have. So that means winning by, not only winning, but winning by enough to make it very hard to challenge, and winning down ballot in Congress by enough so that a governor or two, declining to certify an election won't be able to derail the process. So that means, so again, it means winning by enough, winning by as much as possible, down ballot and in the swing states. And rather than a message of despair, like there's so many ways they can steal this election, I'm hoping to figure out a way to talk about it that will be motivating. I think, Harvey, I don't know if you have specific questions or anything else you want me to say.
Well,
again,
what
I
I'd
want
like
to
to do,
emphasize, this is not the only scenario. This is just one that I thought of. I'm not even an election expert. So again, if I could think of it, I'm sure others can. And there's many other scenarios. We should not be complacent because the Electoral Reform Act, there are holes still in the Electoral College process. There are holes because of the governors that could align with this, because of senators and members of Congress. So it's not that I'm trying to put forward my scenario as the one to be fought, but just as an example of all the things that can happen.
well, Kenny, that's really cogent. Your article at Truth Out, which we've put it up, is really critical. We've got some hands, but if it's okay, I'd like to go straight to Ray McClendon. Ruth, MYLA, Mike, if you'll wait, because Ray McClendon is in the heart of this in Georgia. We also have John Brakey with us. And John, if you could be prepared to give us a brief report on Arizona, where it's probably 150 degrees. We'll talk to you next. But Ray McClendon, who's been with Citizens, with Communities United, and has been at the heart of this election protection fight, and is a real expert in all this. Ray, do you want to comment on what Kenny has said, and then jump in and tell us what's happening in Georgia? That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. And hello, Kenny. It's always great to see you, and thanks for all the support that you provided to folks like Andrea and the efforts we have here in Georgia throughout the last several years. First of all, it might not necessarily be likely what Kenny is saying, but it's certainly plausible. And to his critical point, we have to be prepared. As I mentioned before to many on this call, we were excited in 2020. We remember the background in 2020. We had come off of two resounding victories on January the 5th. That's where all our attention had been to elect two senators from Georgia. On January the 5th, we were still popping the champagne and celebrating that victory, and then we woke up to January 6th. And because nobody was really focused on that. We were focused on delivering those two Senate victories which of course led in no small measure to all of the success that the Biden-Harris administration had in terms of all of the historic legislation that was passed. So since that time, the MAGA folks have gotten much savvier in terms of how to respond. That was just a test. Now they have burrowed themselves into these local election boards across the country. They have MAGA election deniers in many of these areas, and they are prepared to block certification. Someone wrote in the chat that Georgia is the poster child for the kind of thing that Kenny's talking about, and that's absolutely correct. This time around, though, all of us are watching these events from a federal, national, as well as a state and local level, and we're prepared to take action in advance. I think that's the critical thing that we must know, is not only that we need to be diligent in terms of watching what they're doing, but also be prepared to take action. We're taking action here in Georgia. There's been several ethics violation requests made to the governor's office about the MAGA members of the state election board and the rules that they're trying to pass at this 11th hour going into the November election. There's also been a lawsuit filed by the Democratic National Committee along with the State Democratic Committee and several Democratic members of the state legislature, and joined by other local election board members. Also, there are other civic engagement groups such as ours that are in this battle, writing letters to the governors supporting the lawsuit that has already been filed. So people clearly have their eye on this, and it's bringing the kind of pressure and shining the light on this that needs to happen. But it needs to continue not only in Georgia but in all of the battleground states, so that they will not be able to get away with this going forward. Just this morning, we were in court here in Georgia, in Clayton County, which is right outside of Atlanta, taking now Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones to task for being a fake elector in 2020. Most people have forgotten about the fact that he would have been one of the co-conspirators in that was under indictment. He would have been a co-conspirator. He was an unindicted co-conspirator in the big Fonnie Willis case. But because Fonnie Willis had in that case, she had supported the Democratic Party nominee for lieutenant governor, she was forced to recuse herself, and a local prosecutor was supposed to be named by the prosecuting attorney's council. They have sat on that case for 2 years and have not named a prosecuting attorney to look into the matter against Burt Jones. So we brought a lawsuit on that case. So we across the board are looking at all of these shenanigans and to hold people to account, to follow the rule of law across the board. And so we support what Kenny is talking about here. We've got to be prepared for this. This is about chaos. It's not necessarily about them having the law on their side. It's about having the chaos on their side sufficient that a political decision can be made at one of these levels by either the Congress or the Supreme Court. And that's what we've got to fight hard against beforehand, and not wait until after the fact to try to join the fight.
That's amazing, incredible. And I want to bring in now, thank you for that, from Georgia, Ray. I want to bring in John Brakey. Brakey John is in Arizona. If we were to name, well, Arizona and Georgia are two of the 7 key states here. John, can you give us a quick update on we got 70 people with you, 71. If you want to give us a quick update on the struggle for a fair and legal election in Arizona, and then we'll go to our callers, starting with Ruth Strauss. But unless we're joined by the senator from Maryland. But go ahead, John Brakey, can you tell us what's going on in Arizona? Let's see, we got you unmuted here, John. I want to point out, by the way, that Ray had a significant personal impact with Andrea Miller in Georgia in 2020, as John has had in Arizona. Two of the most influential people actually in having shaped the current state of affairs in this country are with us. John, did you get muted somehow?
John dropped off. I'm not sure what that was.
Oh, okay. All right then.
And we're clear with the senator. He's not going to be on until about 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific.
Okay, so we got Ruth Strauss. You had your hand. Then MYLA, Dr. Nancy Tatanka, Mike Hirsch. Go ahead, Ruth Strauss, please. Let's see if I can get you unmuted. My least favorite part of this job is trying to get people unmuted. There we go. Oh, John Brakey has come back. And I can't get Ruth unmuted. John,
Ruth has to unmute herself.
Okay,
she
John
walked
Brakey.
away, but we do have John back again.
John Brakey, are you unmuted?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you give us great to have you with us. I
thank you.
Gave you responsibility for having saved the world in 2020. What can you tell us about the kind of fight that Ray McClendon is doing in Georgia? What's happening in Arizona?
Well, first I heard what Kenny said and Ray and I agree. We got a real problem, okay? And but doing nothing is not a solution. So let's talk about Arizona. And let's talk about a meeting I had with, I think, one of the best Secretary of States in the country, Adrian Fontes, and what he's going to do. He's going to make sure that these election boards have the availability of all electronic records, the digital, but they cannot screw around with the hand-marked paper ballots. And he is not going to ask them to use Abe, he's going to say, you guys can make a decision, but we got a Microsoft product that you need 2 records. If you get the cast vote record database and you get the ballot images, you can run 400,000 images and do that in 35 minutes, and then sort them into precincts and analyze that. Because I don't know if I'd want to be on a board of elections and be told, listen, you have no right to look at this data. You must turn around, okay, and certify, and you can't look at anything. What are we trying to do? Provoke a civil war? You know what I'm saying? Hey, listen, if they think that they can take the images now and screw with them and change them, well, ever heard of being tarred and feathered? The county has the original ballot. The county has the original image that's married to the original ballot. And there you go, okay? And, maybe if we start proving to people in this country that elections are real, maybe more people might vote.
Well, let me ask you, John. One of the concerns is Georgia is the apparatus that would certify the election. And Ray has expressed concern about a possible, and Ray, don't let me put words in your mouth. Is there anybody within the election apparatus in Arizona that would fight certification of the election?
So what you got to understand here is that John is doing great work within the construct of the policies and rules and procedures with an elected member of government, okay, there in Arizona. In Georgia, what the legislature and the MAGA folks have shrewdly done is they have cut out the Secretary of State from the state election board. And now they have these MAGA unelected members of this board promulgating rules that will give license to local election MAGA members to go off on wild goose chases. So it's not like the Secretary of State has set up and established a process. They already have a process. It might not be as good as what John is talking about, but they have a process. And they are the appropriate party that should be reviewing whether or not there are any issues with respect to local election certification. What has happened now is that this unelected election board has now taken over the process of saying, hey, local election board, you can now do any quote unquote reasonable inquiry to look at anything you want to look at that you might be suspicious of. In other words, a cat and a dog were walking by a drop box at 11 o'clock at night. And so we think they might have stolen some votes out of the drop box, or they might have been stuffing on behalf of a nursing home. And so we have the right now to go through that process and therefore slow things down because they have a legitimate, in their mind, reason to ask for an inquiry, a reasonable, in their mind, inquiry about that drop box in a specific county. Those are the kinds of insane things that will come up. And number two, what that will do is give, going back to Kenny's point, it will give the color of an official proceeding to potential evidence that the Trump folks will go into court with, which they didn't have in 2020. All of their stuff was, hey, some fell off a truck or whatever, and we got an affidavit from the truck driver. Now they'll be able to get an affidavit from a legitimate local election board member saying, hey, we can't certify yet because we have, under this new rule, the right to reasonable inquiry, and therefore, you just got to give us time to look into this, judge, even though it specifically says that we're supposed to certify no later than, in this case, November 12th, the Monday after the election. So that's what we're doing. We're not dealing with anything where it's as straightforward as what John is dealing. He's dealing with logical people. We're dealing
got
with
some
irrational
crazies
people.
out here. We got Mark Fincham. We got a whole bunch of those people. But we got a great Secretary of State, and it is different. I mean, you've got a state board of elections. We got a Secretary of State. And so all these little battles will be fought in the counties. And we realize that a lot of these guys who are going to fight, when they go back to the constituent and says, hey, guess what? They locked us out. They just wanted us to sign off. We couldn't look at anything. And that is going to be a disaster. Okay?
Well, the question then is, John, in Arizona and Ray in Georgia, do the MAGA infiltrators in the election apparatus have the ability to prevent certification beyond the legal limit?
And that's what we've got to prosecute a case on, that they don't have the authority. Our debate here is a little bit different than John's. Our debate here is that the local election boards will not be looking to confirm what is right and what is correct and accurate. They will be looking to fan any flame of potential impropriety to the point of delaying for solely the purpose of chaos that would allow for the state legislature to step in if Trump loses the election here and come up with an alternate set of electors. They've thought this through. What they tried to do in 2020 illegally, they want to have the cover of legality by saying, well, the local election board, 2 or 3 local election boards can't certify at all. Therefore, the overall statewide can't be certified, vote can't be certified. So let's just throw it over to the supermajority control, Republican controlled legislature for them to determine who the electors from Georgia are. That's the end game here in Georgia.
What about
Well,
Arizona,
bad
John?
thing
Is that a scenario that could happen in Arizona?
No, it couldn't really, the way that's structured now, even though they tried in the last session. There's several people being prosecuted because they didn't certify or they claimed that they were not going to, okay? But, you know, the law is that, you know, hey, you got 5 to 7 days to certify. It's really hard to do, you know, with the old system because what do you want, speed or accuracy, okay? Gee, we want to check the ballots in Maricopa. Oh, they're in 1,400 boxes. They're all in batches. Nothing is by precinct. It's a disaster. But with using off-the-shelf software like Microsoft Office, Abe, then you go ahead, get the spreadsheet. You know, go ahead and turn everything into precincts, and then you randomly pick a few. And let's say you got 1,000 people in that precinct. You don't have to check everyone. Come up with a formula: 1, 30, 60, 90. Check everything on the ballot. And then when you get that done, then you go ahead and hit insert pivot table, and then you get the results. And then you match that against the originals. This is super fast stuff. You know,
So, Ray, do you have
incredible.
anything like that? Do you have
What?
anything like that in Georgia that would avoid?
Again, the
Well,
Secretary
you do.
of
It's
State,
you
the
have the
Secretary
Dominion
of State's
system.
office, the Secretary of State's office
Yeah.
can do something very similar to this, but they don't control the function that we're dealing with right now. This is an unelected board that's
Wow.
trying to give license to these local election boards, not to deal with the brick and mortar issues that John is talking about, but anything that they might have thought they saw on driving on the way to the courthouse that now they
Right.
can look into that can slow this down. This is not about policy. This is not about audit forensics. This is about them being able to come up with some conspiracy theory
Wow.
and give it credence to the point that they can have a reasonable inquiry and therefore delay certification.
Amazing. I will point out
I
just
think
in
that's going to be a
passing.
lot harder than it was last time because everybody's preparing for it. Okay. The only thing that scares me about the preparing is that we're getting, as an activist, and I've been doing this 20 years, I'm having the hardest time getting public records. They're shutting everybody off. Okay. And, you know, I've been there 20 years. I see the Republicans saying, hey, we got to fight fire with fire. You're right, Ray. They're going to pull something. Okay. But I'm worried about they're going to pull something really big, like they've spent a lot of time how to get in the back door of the election system somehow because of an insider or something like that. They tell us the results are good. What do they tell us? Hey, we ran a logic and accuracy test before and after. And all that means it's working right at this moment because we know that Volkswagen built a computer that went into their diesel cars that's cost them $33 billion the time they got done with the United States because they sold 480,000 cars. And every time it went into emissions and they tested it, it cheated because it knew when to cheat. Pretty
So what we
simple.
got here, let me just point out in passing that the 7 swing states that will decide the election, which are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and New Mexico, and Nevada. Of those 7 states, 5 have Democratic governors. Georgia is not one of them. Georgia and Nevada both have Republican governors. The other 5 states have Democrat governors. I don't know the count in secretaries of state, and I don't know the count in controls of legislature. But I think you're shut out in Georgia, even though the polls are now starting to show that Harris may be ahead in the popular vote. You've got no traction whatsoever in the election apparatus. Is that correct?
We don't have majority control in the legislature or on the state election board. That's why we got to pay so much attention to the election board. We believe that we can. We don't believe that Kemp, although he is supporting Trump, would necessarily undermine his own voting apparatus. He did not come to Trump's defense in 2020. So we think we've got an opportunity there. But to your main point, we don't have the kind of support that they have in those other states. And also, to the point I made earlier, that the Secretary of State stood up for elections in 2020, and he was summarily cut out of the appointed position on the state election board. We have 159 counties in Georgia, and that's why this is such a problem, because every one of those counties has a local election board. They all have between 3, 5, and 7 board members, and any number of those members could be MAGA election deniers. So the room for some kind of whack-a-mole here is extraordinary.
No, I think you have a bigger problem than what we have in Arizona because of the structure, because we got a Democratic governor, we got a Secretary of State, is second to none, the best in the country, Fontes, and he's a real fighter, and we only got 15 counties, and yeah, most of my state, it's a heavily Republican state, but our boards, election groups are pretty good. But, you know, after 20 years of me suing him and beating up on him, and, you know, it's interesting how much people are aware in Arizona. And we hope to spread that news across the country. You know, after I get off here, I'll put some things in the chat that people can check out. And then next week, Harvey, I might have Ken Bennett on with us. And if we get the time, we'll explain what we're doing. And then Ray Lutz is doing some incredible stuff. I don't know if you know or not, because he's got the Attorney General of the United States looking at stuff pretty seriously when it comes to images and making sure.
Very good.
So it is exciting what's going to happen. But on the long run, I am very concerned about this thing getting really nasty in November.
Really. Well, it's a guarantee. I will testify, John, that you have way more gray in your beard now than you did 20 years ago. And it's entirely due to you being sued by whoever it was to keep you from getting
going on.
public
Santa
records.
Cruz County. It's the one. I'll put that in. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I gotta explain to everybody real quick that John was sued by the state, by a county government, merely for trying to get public records. It's personally sued, which has really, you know, been a mind-boggling situation. Kenny Bruno, do you want to jump in before we go to questions?
Well, I just want to say that everything that you're talking about is really important, but I also want to say that one thing people might be missing is that down ballot races in blue and red states really matters. So of course the 7 swing states are critical, as you said, Harvey, but so are Congress races, even in blue and red states, because without a defendable House majority that will vote to certify a Harris-Walz win, assuming they win, we could still be in trouble. We could still not get certification and therefore go to a contingent election. So I'm by no means saying that the 7 swing states aren't super critical and important, just adding that our attention also needs to still be on congressional races in red and blue states. And don't go to sleep on Mike Johnson, because he'll say he's the speaker, and he'll be the speaker until noon on January 3rd. And he's a self-described constitutional nerd who will find every maneuver and machination possible that you could possibly imagine to keep himself in power. We know who he wants to be president. And even though he's a constitutional nerd, somehow miraculously, his very careful analysis always seems to align with his political preference. So don't go to sleep on the Supreme Court. Don't go to sleep on Mike Johnson. And that's why these other races, even in red and blue states, New York, California, Texas, but they matter as well.
Well, ironically, I've read an analysis that says that the control of the House will be decided in New York and California. That there are a large number of House races that are turning point races in those two states.
Right, and New York had a very unfortunate 4-member swing red
Yes,
in 2022. This time, maybe the Harris Walz coattails will switch it back, but we can't take that for granted. There are
Right.
people working pretty hard in the suburbs of New York City where where those seats could swing back, and that's
right.
again that's really important. If we
I
could
got
pick a race in Ohio or Texas, there's some
Right.
toss-up races there. Those can be very important.
Yes, and I will point out that the pro-democracy forces over the last few weeks have had the incredible luxury of having Steve Bannon in jail, and he's about to get out. So we'll see about that as well. Okay, I'm going to go to questions now. You guys good? Ruth Strauss, MYLA. Ruth Strauss first, please, and then MYLA.
Yeah, hi. Well, we've got a profusion of talent here. Having John reminds me of the cyber ninjas who turned out to be one guy who made a $400,000 down payment with the money that Arizona was so nice to give him, and then it turned out he found that Biden won anyway. Ray is the centerpiece of, or Georgia is the centerpiece of this new updated film by Greg Palast, Vigilantes Inc. Everybody needs to watch that. It's hysterically funny, but also extremely alarming. And especially it's showing here in Los Angeles, several showings this week. However, on I think Friday the 13th, it will be available online, I think at gregpalast.com, for anybody to watch. And it's an extraordinarily clever but alarming film. And I'm saying this for people to tell other people who don't understand how bad things can get. That's a film that very entertainingly lays it out. And of course, Georgia is front and center in there.
So now, I will mention, Ruth, next week, thank you for that. Next week, Greg Palast will be with us.
Okay,
and
great.
We will talk in depth about that.
Okay, well, one other thing. Yesterday on Ralph Nader, there was a kid, last name is Berlin. His website is Field Team 6, like a play on words for SEAL Team 6, FIELD Team 6. He is doing registration, especially for young people, and he's done a fantastic job. So people should visit that, and if there's a way you want to help, because it is a numbers game, and if you want to help enlist more people to vote, he's very well organized about it. So those are two resources.
I will point out at 6, Ruth, thank you for that. Thank you also for your research on the program at KPFK, really valuable. I will point out that Andrea Miller will soon be joining us with her great expertise on get out the vote stuff. Ray McClendon's great cohort here. Thank you, Ruth. We have 78 people with us. MYLA RESON.
Marilyn Marks is with us from Georgia as well right now. Thank you.
Thank
you,
Steve.
Marilyn Marks.
Steve, I was just going to say that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out, I'm sorry, Marilyn Marks, the great election protection advocate, has just joined the call. So I'm hoping that we can hear from her next. But if you don't mind, I'll just say a few things and then we'll bring Marilyn on.
No,
that's okay.
We'll go with Nancy, Tatanka, Mike, Lynn, and then Marilyn.
Oh, okay. At any rate,
Go ahead.
I've got a couple of things to say. And
Please,
then
go ahead.
I do have a question for Ray after I've made this particular comment. Let's say that we manage to prepare well enough and fight well enough to actually get Kamala Harris and Tim Walz elected and seated. If we don't have a majority in the Senate, if the Democrats don't control the Senate, then, and that is part of the down ballot calculation, then we will be in a lot of trouble because it is the Republicans who manage to appoint a whole lot of right-wing judges when they have control of the Senate. And I about 30 years ago, when I was just a hopeless C-SPAN nerd, I watched a presentation on C-SPAN about the plan that the Republicans had to take over the judiciary. And they have succeeded in spades, as they say. You know, they've succeeded and now they control the Supreme Court. And there are two Senate races that are particularly important. One in Nebraska, we actually have an opportunity to get an independent union organizer named Dan Osborne elected. He will caucus with the Democrats if he is elected, and that could stop the Republicans from having control of the US Senate. And the other is John Tester in Montana. And I think that we really need to pay attention to both of those races and make sure that both of those candidates win in order to prevent the Republicans from taking control of the Senate. Now I have my question for Ray, and it has to do with the local election boards. I am wondering what the threshold is. Is it possible for one election board out of, I believe there are something like 150 something election boards in the state of Georgia. Is it possible for one election board to throw everything into chaos, or what is the threshold? That's my question. Thank you so much to everybody.
Well, there is no threshold, and that's what a part of the problem is, that until all of the 159 counties have certified, you can't certify the statewide results. And so you could have, once again, some of these smaller counties that are MAGA controlled local election boards theoretically have reasonable inquiries going on for indeterminate amounts of time, regardless of what the statute says about mandatory certification, that could then allow for chaos to ensue and throw us into you know, that the challenges that we've talked about. So that's why the lawsuit that's going on is important, and that's why having all of these civic engagement partners, along with the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Party of Georgia, as well, with putting the spotlight on this, is so important, as we've already talked about. We must keep this on the forefront over the next 60 days, so that we can try to keep these shenanigans to a minimum, and be prepared to fight them when they come up, because any one county can be a thorn in the side of getting certification done statewide.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for that. MYLA, thanks for the question. And Ray, go to Nancy NIPARKO. Nancy?
Hi, thank you, and thank you, everyone. I was one of the privileged who got to see Greg Palast film last night. I strongly recommend it to everyone, especially I want to know what Ray thinks about it when he sees it, and Harvey's history career. It gives you the history of why there's the voter suppression, and there is nothing that I've come across that was more motivating than saying our first thing is to overwhelm the voting with numbers and getting everybody's vote to count. So I would suggest everyone's homework before the next week is that you at least go to Greg Palace and look at the preview that is posted there, if you can't see the film yet, but it's fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, Greg's work is great. Thank you so much. And as I say, we will have Greg Palace with us next week. And Ray, of course, you're invited. We hope you can come back and be with Greg. It would really be a great thing. Tatanka, then Mike Hirsch, and then Lynn Finerman, and then Marilyn Marks. Go ahead, Tatanka.
Hi, Ray. Good to see you. Do you still need legal observers for people in the state so that you can be documenting the shenanigans?
Well, that's a great question. We don't necessarily need legal observers. We just need citizen support as local election board, essentially local election board monitors, to go along with poll monitors going into the election in October, so that we'll know what's going on in all 159 counties. We are in the process of putting together teams of people, training folks through various coalitions that we have that can be a part of that process. And we're going to need some financial support for that in order to crisscross the state with local citizens that are prepared to stand up for their rights in their respective counties and hold their local election board members accountable. So that's a big part of what we were doing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we finish this segment.
Okay.
About what we'll be doing going into the fall on election protection around election time, and specifically with these local election boards.
So if
Fantastic.
people who are out of state like us, the best way we can help is money, not.
Yeah, the best way is financial support, because as we've talked about before with relational organizing works best when you have local trusted messengers delivering trusted messages. So what we want to do is to have the infrastructure in place, which takes resources to identify the local leadership that can then be trained properly to do the necessary work, and that's much more effective.
So nothing has really changed in terms of getting money from the DNC or for the Harris campaign at the local GOTV.
We're working on that. There have been some discussions, but as of this point, no money is flowing. So we got to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tatanka. Thank you, Ray. Mike, I'm going to jump over real quick to Lynn Finerman, and then I know you'll want to introduce the state senator, and also we have Andrea Miller with us. Lynn, go ahead, and then we'll go to Mike, and then state senator from Maryland, and then Andrea Miller. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yes, actually, I had just a very simple question, and that is, there's a lot of media about how Georgia and Pennsylvania are the states of all the swing states. And I just wanted to see if anybody wanted to do any analysis for me on that. But basically, now that Marilyn Marks is on, I would just like to introduce her and thank her mightily for jumping on this meeting. Very busy lady and very involved with these precise issues of election theft and election blocking and machine problems and everything else. So thank you so much, Marilyn, for coming on.
All right, Marilyn, if you can, thank you, Lynn. The analysis we can do in a bit, but Lynn, Marilyn, if you can go for a minute, and then we're going to go to Mike Hirsch, who will introduce the state senator, and then Andrea Miller. Marilyn Marks, and go ahead very quickly, please.
Okay, and you just wanted me to give a 2-minute. I was just called and said, "Can you join us?" I'll give you 2 minutes of what I'm concerned about Georgia, and then we'll figure out.
Okay, real quick, please go ahead.
Okay, basically, I am extremely worried about Georgia from a counting the votes perspective. After all, there have been no mitigations done for the software vulnerabilities and the software theft. Trump's team stole the software. Nothing has been done to keep them from subverting the vote. It looks to me like there is a great possibility that they would subvert the vote, that if not, he has been given so many bases to challenge the vote after the election. I'm extremely worried about it, and I don't see any defense that is being pulled together and organized in place. And we keep trying, but we're not seeing anything. And I'm speaking for a moment, not for CGG, but personally in my individual capacity, just to say this. In Kamala Harris's book, she talks about bringing Alex Halderman into Congress, and he put on a demonstration of how easy it is to hack a touchscreen voting machine. And she talks about, can you believe it? It's in her book. Now we have Alex Halderman now screaming at the top of his lungs, Georgia is at great risk, but nobody has her back. No one has her back in Georgia. That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, Ray McClendon is with us from Atlanta. I assume, Ray, are you in touch with Maryland and vice versa?
No,
we're not, but I would love to be.
Okay, great to meet you.
Please make that please exchange. Although Maryland, please exchange contacts in the chat. And
okay,
Maryland,
I'll see if I can figure out how to do that.
I have Ray's. If you'll write me directly, solartopia@gmail, I will make sure you're in touch with Ray, and you come back next week. And
okay, let me say one final word. Let me just say that on all of these issues, you know, we continue to fight with our coalition here in Georgia. We will be having a webinar on Sunday night from 7 p.m. Eastern time to 8:30 to talk about the state of play on the ground in Georgia. Communities United for Justice, the organization that I head along with Richard Rose. We're delighted to have Andrea Miller that's going to participate, and we'll have Congressman Hank Johnson from Georgia, Congressman Sanford Bishop from Georgia, as well as Bishop Reginald Jackson, who is the bishop for the AME Church for the state of Georgia, outgoing, who's been very prominent in all of our statewide get out the vote efforts across Georgia. They'll also be joined by former mayor of Atlanta, Shirley Franklin, who will all be a part of our call on Sunday night. So you'll all be getting invitations. Mike, I will send it to you if you can get it out to the list.
Yes, we will.
This will be an opportunity to learn about the state of play, the tactics we'll be using in much greater detail, and hopefully also to raise some money for these efforts that we'll have going on for the next 60 days or so.
Fantastic. So Ray, you're now in touch with Marilyn Marks. John Brakey, you know, the great expert who really introduced digital scanning to the whole election protection movement, I'm sure would be available. We have, as a matter of protocol, we've been joined, and Andrea Miller will be with us in a couple of minutes. We have a state senator from Maryland for the 80 people that we have with us. Mike Hurst, do you want to introduce him? And then Jeff, would be great to hear from you. And then we'll go to Andrea Miller.
Yeah, thanks so much, Harvey. First, I wanted to thank Kenny. It's absolutely essential that we're paying attention to the machinations. And Harvey, you alerted us to the plans that MAGA had going back quite a while. And just about 4 years ago, we had a press conference talking about violence if Trump lost the election. We thought it would happen right after the election. It turns out we were a few months early. But anyway, stay tuned. This is the place where you're going to find out about things that are happening before they become news. And with that said, I just want to transition over to welcoming my own state senator, Jeff Walz. It's great to see you again, Senator. Thank you for spending time with us. I know that you had an extremely busy session, and there's another one coming up that'll be just as busy. with the news of yet another school shooting. I know that that was one of the issues that you addressed. I think we've been pretty lucky in Maryland that we have not had a school shooting here, but I know we did have a news office that was attacked, and there were fatalities there. So we're doing the best we can in Maryland. We've been keeping our schools safe thanks to Jeff Walz and a lot of the people in our legislature who've been all over this issue. And Jeff, I would love to hear, and we would all love to hear what you've been up to in Annapolis and throughout Maryland, and especially Maryland's plan to protect our elections from any chicanery and interference that could be planned. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us, Jeff. And right behind you will be Andrea Miller, who we hope you can stay and listen to her. She is doing the great work with Ray McClendon and others on the Get Out the Vote. So go ahead, give us the state of the election in Maryland, if you would, please, Jeff.
I would, and I'd be happy to. First of all, thank you to each and every one of you on this call for having me here this evening. My name is Jeff Walz. It's my honor to serve as a state senator here in Maryland, and you guys are lucky to have Mike Hirsch among your leadership. Mike is really a special individual here in Maryland. I know you see him every Monday virtually on this call, and I was on this call last year, and it's just incredibly valuable. But if you like Mike virtually and are impressed with him over the internet, you should see him in person because he's quite the leader here in Maryland. We're deeply indebted to him in the progressive movement in this state. Let me just start in Georgia. Because I know that's where the previous speaker spoke. Georgia is a state that's close to my heart. That's where I went to college. I was down there in the spring. If you haven't had a chance to visit Georgia and help out with the election there, it's one of the greatest food cities in the United States. And I am always inspired, not just by my progressive values, but also by my stomach. And so I think the Georgia folks and the Atlanta folks can back me up, whether it's Fellini's for pizza or Eats for pasta or Taco Mac for wings. I'm throwing out obscure restaurants here, but these are some of my favorite places. If you go to Georgia and volunteer for election protection or volunteer for the Harris campaign, you will be well fed. I promise you that. And so I encourage you all to help out with all the important work that's happening in Georgia. There's no need to volunteer here in Maryland. That's not because we don't love you. We'd love to have you here. And we've got an important U.S. Senate race here to ensure that Democrats keep control over the U.S. Senate. But when it comes to election protection, Maryland is in a good place. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because of the leadership of the progressive movement, like you, people like Mike Hirsch, and legislators who kind of take the bull by the horns on this issue. For many years, I served with Jamie Raskin, the constitutional law professor that is now in Congress. We overlapped for a decade in the Assembly, and he and I worked closely together on a lot of election protection issues. And let me just give you kind of the state of play in Maryland. Not because we'll be able to implement these things over the next 59 days in states that are unfriendly to these issues, but because everyone needs a model to use in the states that they are working. And Maryland's a small state, and you don't hear much about it. And sometimes kind of on the progressive vanguard, you hear more about West Coast states, big states like California, experimental states like Oregon. But really, I'd encourage everyone to look to the Maryland model because a lot of incredible work is happening here. And so we do a few things here in Maryland that are critical. Most of our voting is mail-in voting, which you see on the West Coast and has been the case here in Maryland since COVID. And that allows people to fill out ballots on their own time using Scantron forms in a way that reduces the opportunity for any mischievous behavior by either political party, by those who seek to influence the election in a nefarious way. And so mail-in voting is really the key to so many of the things that we do here in Maryland to secure the vote. Of course, one of the most important things is access to the ballot. And Maryland, I'd say about a decade ago, like many states, unfortunately, like many states with high African-American populations, disenfranchised a huge proportion of our population by not allowing convicted felons to have the franchise, to vote. And Maryland said that is ludicrous. If someone has served their time and someone has returned to society, they should get their rights back. They get their First Amendment right back. They get their Second Amendment rights back in certain circumstances. They should certainly get their right to vote returned to them. Maryland has the largest African-American population north of the Deep South, and we returned the franchise to our returning citizens to make sure everyone has the right to vote. Not only that, and here's where we went even further. We allow some voting in prison for people who are incarcerated for certain crimes that don't rise to the level of disenfranchisement for the period of incarceration. We allow them to vote in jail. And so even folks who are incarcerated still retain their God-given right to choose their own government. And I think that's a really effective thing here in Maryland. We have early voting. Like many states prior to COVID, early voting was really something that we saw that people wanted to have the flexibility, especially for working people who can't always make it at a specific time on a specific day. And we've dramatically expanded early voting. For those of you who know the DC area, I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a suburb just north of DC. It's got a little over 1 million people. We have, I think, now 14 early vote locations. That's a lot for a jurisdiction of our size, which means it's close by. Most of these places have easy access to transit, which is really critical to protecting the vote in our community. And then let me use this as an opportunity to pivot between two different issues. In many states, you see folks trying to intimidate those who would vote by bringing firearms to polling places or near polling places. And in Maryland, we disallowed that. And it's important that we did so. No one should feel unsafe as they go to vote. No one should feel like they are going to run into open armed citizens when they just jump into their local elementary school to pull the lever for their favorite candidate. And that kind of segues into what Maryland is doing on firearms. And again, I encourage those of you who are working on this issue to look to our little small state in our corner of the United States over here for what we're doing on the issue of gun violence. Because as we saw in Georgia last week and across this country, too many people and too many kids especially are dying from gun violence. When I was growing up, and I'm not that old, when I was growing up, the #1 killer of children was car accidents. And as terrible as that is, kind of as it should be, right now, the #1 killer of children is firearm violence, far outpacing car accidents. And that's a really big, dramatic change that people somehow got used to or aren't feeling in their lives. But it speaks ill of our society and what we've become when our children are dying at such a high rate by firearm violence. And that includes suicide. And so here's what
that's very important. If you'll keep with us just for another couple minutes on that, then we're going to go to Andrea Miller.
Okay.
Really
Yes, I want to be respectful of your time, of course. And so let me name
that's very important.
Let me name 3 big things that Maryland has done when it comes to firearms. First, Maryland requires the secure storage of firearms. So one of the things we know statistically is that 75% of school shooters gain access to the firearms because a family member or friend left a gun unsecured. Maryland requires guns to be secured and apart from the ammunition that can be used in firearms. And that is part of the reason Maryland's school shooting rate, while not perfect, and the best number, of course, is 0, is much less than we see in other states. After the Bruin decision from our awful conservative right-wing Supreme Court, the Supreme Court basically said you could bring a gun anywhere unless it's a sensitive place. This will shock you, not at all. The court gave one example of a sensitive place where guns should be disallowed: courthouses. And so we used that reasoning to say, you know what's analogous to courthouses? Churches, synagogues, and mosques, schools and hospitals, playing fields where kids are gathering. And so we passed dramatic sensitive place legislation to make sure that guns are disallowed where in sensitive places where people are gathered. And so far, the vast majority of that law has been upheld. And then here's the last thing. And so many of you are active not only on election protection issues and gun issues, but also environmental issues. And you know this already, but this is new for guns. Liability and litigation works. It works for environmental protection. It worked when it came to tobacco. It worked when it came to opioids. Suing people and holding them accountable changes behavior, changes companies, and changes industry. And for too long, the gun industry has been immune from suits. It is at the federal level, and it was in Maryland. We changed that. In Maryland, we passed a law that just went into effect that holds the gun industry liable for their wrongful behavior, such as selling guns to straw purchasers. And so I think you're going to see some additional lawsuits. Check your news, follow Maryland, because we're going to start to hold that industry accountable, and the industry will change and become safer because of that. And so that, with that, I want to say thank you again to Mike and to each and every one of you. I know you meet weekly. It's important what you're doing. Keep fighting the fight, and I'll be right there with you.
Jeff, that was a great presentation. Really terrific. You managed to cram in so much and so quickly. And if you can keep coming back, we would especially like to see a codification that people can read on the state of your election protection in Maryland. That would be a very, very big deal for us, because going forward, we're going to need that kind of role modeling from a state. So we really appreciate it and appreciate your work. Okay.
Thank you.
And I got to ask you, I'm intrigued on your diploma on the wall there. What university is it?
That's Emory. That's Emory University. That's how I can make all these Atlanta restaurant recommendations.
That's what I thought.
College down there. Yeah.
I couldn't let you go. I couldn't read it. Okay. All right. Listen, Jeffrey, you should stay, because Andrew Miller is a huge player in election issues, and you should be in touch. And we're not going to take Maryland for granted. Thank goodness you provided us with Jamie Raskin, and when you become a U.S. Senator, we'll certainly be reading about you. Andrea Miller, we've invited you on. You've got big doings with Get Out the Vote. Can you tell us, please, and you've been with us before, can you tell us, please, and you have a webinar coming up on Sunday, if you'll post the, I think it's Sunday, yeah?
Well, I want people to go to the Georgia fundraiser. We have a 501c4 in Virginia, National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia, and we are doing a series on Project 2025. And so the second item in that series will be on Sunday, and it is how Project 2025 or what it does for reproductive rights and women's health. And then on the 22nd, it will be all about Project 2025, voter suppression on steroids. So, yes.
I think it's meth, but go ahead, please. Andrea, let's hear now about your fantastic work.
All right. Well, let me share my screen. I've got a fun photo that I think people will enjoy. The image will be up in a moment, and you're looking at a giant FedEx truck. What is on that FedEx truck, you might ask? 150,000 postcards going to one of our organizers in Georgia. So yes, Ray, Dr. Monica does have the postcards so that the Divine Nine will be able to write those postcards to their fellow Georgia citizens. And again, what is so spectacular about that, we're ultimately going to spend probably 1.3, 1.5 million postcards to Black voters. What is so great about this is these are Black voters in Georgia writing these postcards to their fellow citizens. So we are very, very excited about that. They aren't going to be coming from outside Georgia.
I was going to say, whoever gets those postcards is going to wind up with a serious case of writer's cramp. But nonetheless, continue, please. This is fantastic.
All right. And we have got phone banks running into Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia right now. And we just signed on a brand new partner for Florida. So this, I believe, I am very, very, very excited about this election. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. We do phone bank training every Tuesday from 6 to 8, and every Saturday, and that's Eastern, from 4 to 6 Eastern. We have partners doing training on Wednesday and Thursday. So once you learn how to use our phone banks, we use the dialer. It makes one call at a time. It's not that ridiculous power dialer. And we leave messages. Our thoughts about phone banking is, if you get a phone that has an answering machine, not leaving a message is like knocking on a door, canvassing, and not bothering to leave any literature. Since we are calling voters and telling them where they can vote, when early voting offices are going to open, and where they are, we think voters want that information, and we know they like that information because voters call us back. Now, no voter is going to call you on your number. They're going to call the dialer number. When we are running phone banks to a specific state, one of our trainers is assigned to get the callbacks that may be coming in when you call a voter and they're standing there listening to the message and then decide, wait a minute, I've got a question, and they push redial, it goes to one of our phones. So it's very, very sophisticated, but designed to make sure that voters have the information they need to vote. In 2021, Ray McClendon and Richard Rose surveyed about 2,000 Black voters in Atlanta who didn't vote in the 2020 election. And it was very, very interesting and telling the reasons voters gave for not voting. Reason number one, they didn't know where to vote. Well, that's an information problem. So we want to make sure our voters have information. And that will also be what is going on those cards. Reason number two, they couldn't get there. If we had given them the information, they would have known there were free rides to the polls statewide in Georgia. And the very distant third reason why voters didn't vote, they didn't like any of the candidates. Reasons 1 and 2 are fixable. So we are really, really, really working on that. Now, if there are people who want to make more partisan calls, we have an endorsing C4, and you can find our phone banks on Mobilize, NWPC, VA. Well, actually, I always have to click the link. I never remember what it is. Here we go. And it's the same system. You can go and make calls there. Now, yes, we are very, very concerned about Georgia. And let me tell you why we are seeing all the insane voter suppression in Georgia. Georgia has 2.5 million registered Black voters. That is 34% of the registered voting population in Georgia. The powers that be are terrified, absolutely scared out of their mind. And they are just coming up with anything and everything. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be enough. It isn't. It isn't. It isn't. So yes. So that's Georgia. We are working in Alabama. Alabama has a brand new majority minority district in Congressional District 2 that goes from Montgomery down to Mobile. That is the southern end of the Black Belt. So we are working on getting Congressional District Congressional District 2. So that's going to be a very, very interesting race. And the wonderful state of North Carolina was so excited about the work that Team Unity Georgia did that they are forming and have formed Team Unity North Carolina. There are 25 groups in Team Unity North Carolina, and they were so excited about the work that they were beginning to do that they went and they got their Hispanic brothers and sisters and said, hey, you got to be a part of this too. This is like really, really good. And in one county, Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, there are 242,000 registered Black voters. All right, now, you're not going to believe this, but when we talk to people about helping us turn out those 242,000 Black voters plus 60,000 Hispanic voters, that's 300,000 Black and Hispanic voters. Nobody had any money or any interest in supporting the work we were doing. Absolutely none. Yeah, I know. I see the look on your face, Harvey.
Yeah,
If
right.
they hadn't basically told us the same thing in Georgia, I wasn't really surprised. The people in North Carolina were shocked. I mean, they had the president of the Black Political Caucus, who is part of our group. And they were like, no, there's no money for you. We decided that we're going to like spend it in other places. So what is your plan for outreach to Black voters? We don't have one. And don't want one either. So that's okay. We've got our own plan. We are working on raising our own money. Not a problem. Not a problem. We will get the job done.
Wow. Well, listen, Andrea, everybody needs to be in touch with you, obviously. You're continuing. There was a question earlier. I'm going to use your mention of North Carolina to segue very quickly into an overview discussion. And then we want to get back to your postcards and how people can do it. That's very critical, especially with this group. We still have 67 people with us after an hour and a half. This is the Zoom call in America that has the longest attention span of any in the world. So the bottom line is this: as I've been, as most of you, following the election very closely, and the two states I believe that will decide this election are North Carolina and Pennsylvania. People have not been paying attention to North Carolina, but North Carolina has one more electoral vote than does Michigan, and
Yes.
and the same as Georgia. And I want to also thank you, Andrea, personally, for pretty much taking Virginia off the board. Virginia has not been a Democratic state for very long, but no one is really arguing about Virginia at this point in time.
They need to be. We lost two of our incumbent House members. They are not running for re-election again. One is seriously ill, Representative Jennifer Wexton and Representative Abigail Spanberger is going to be running for governor in 2025. Those states are not automatically going to go to another Democrat. And then we've got CD2, Elaine Lauria's old seat, which we lost in 2022. So people need to be paying attention to Virginia. And by the way, we start early voting on Friday. Yes, the month is September 20th. We have 45 days of early voting.
Wow. So, and that's interesting to know. And as mentioned, the congressional races in California and New York are really critical this year.
Yes.
But in terms of the presidential election, if you concede Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan to Harris, which may be a stretch, but isn't really, if we can get through the haze in Georgia, that would be pretty amazing. But everybody now, the polls are showing Harris and Trump even in Pennsylvania, and Trump slightly ahead in North Carolina. Roy Cooper came out, the governor of North Carolina, yesterday, and said that if the Democrats carry North Carolina, they will carry the presidency. You can make that case. I don't know what's going to happen in Arizona. She's behind in Nevada. So, since we have a 7-state election here, North Carolina really is absolutely critical. And I know that you're doing a big GOTV campaign in North Carolina. I don't believe you're as focused on Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
We don't work in Pennsylvania at all. Generally, my board mandate is the state needs to be 20% voters, registered voters of color. Pennsylvania is only 12%. Now, there are a couple of cities, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, where, yes, the number is way above that margin, but in those two cities. Now, let us not throw Florida under the bus. Florida has abortion on the ballot and legalization of marijuana. Women and young people, we are going back into Florida, and we have a new partner on the ground in Broward County. Florida is nearly a majority minority state when we look at registered voters.
Well,
They just don't vote.
I saw an article that claimed that the Democratic candidate for Senate, U.S. Senate, is running close to even with Rick Scott, who I will in a nonpartisan way, term a horrendous abomination. I mean, Rick Scott,
a human being, yes,
he is a piece of work. And I will say that if, God forbid, Rick Scott wins and the Republicans take the U.S. Senate, he could become majority leader. He is
and what about Texas with Colin Allred? We all know how much everyone loves Senator Ted Cruz.
Well, the polls don't show Colin Allred as close to Ted Cruz as they show Debbie, what's her name, in Florida to Rick Scott.
Debbie Merksell Powell.
Right.
It's going to be interesting. Again, Texas is a majority minority state when we look at registered voters. As a friend of mine said about Texas, Texas is not a red state, it's not a blue state, it's a non-voting state. So if we are able to turn the voters out and to get the voters to come and vote, we could be looking at a couple of surprises in Texas and Florida. It's a matter of doing the work and getting the vote out. we won Alabama in 2017 with roughly 8.5 days. So it's going to be interesting looking at the ground in Texas to see how all those efforts play out and how they work out. I'm looking at Texas right now. I don't want to look at that one. I want to check. Here we go. The small numbers. All right. Texas is 40% white or 50% white and 49.25% voters of color. And these are registered voters.
Well, clearly, if Harris somehow carried either Texas or Florida after the collective heart attack of the United States, that she would become president. I think it's not out of the question in Florida, as you say, although having a pot referendum means a lot of the voters are too stoned to go to the polls, but nonetheless, but in both states, we have serious challenges of protecting the outcome.
Yes.
You got to remember who the governors are in those two states. And, of course, someone pointed out in the chat that Trump said he would vote for the marijuana referendum. I think in that case, we would want to return his vote. But nonetheless, so you are working, and do you have people from out of state writing postcards? Is that correct?
Oh, yes. We have people from all over the country writing postcards. Now, our postcards are very different from everyone else's. Number one, our postcards are art. They are designed to get the eye of voters of color. They're not plain white postcards. They don't have sailboats on them. They don't have Great Danes wearing flag hats. These postcards are designed to grab the attention of Black voters. Actually, they grab the attention of pretty much all voters. And we literally just announced a partnership with the James Brown family. And we have a postcard that is exclusive to us. So I'm going to bring that up so you can see it. It is beautiful.
Wow.
This is by Shepard Ferry. And that huge truck I showed you, about 60,000 of the postcards on that truck are James Brown. James Brown was born in South Carolina, but he lived in Georgia.
That's cool.
James Brown, we got to change. He was a huge voting rights and civil rights activist. And then another postcard, these two are new this year. Vote Your Power. With touchscreens, there we go. Vote Your Power. This is artwork by Amir Kadar. And then a very dear 85-year-old donor said, well, dear, if your postcards also go to younger people, she said there should be a Vote Your Future. So we had Amir design a Vote Your Future card.
I think you need to move that up. I can't quite see it. No, the other way. Oh, that's great. There. These on the second tier?
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
The ones on the second tier, right. Flower of Democracy is the postcard from 2023. That's Chuck Sperry. So yes.
So are you getting how you coming with Beyonce? Is she going to be on the next one?
No. Again, the getting the ability and the copyrights to be able to, number one, create the art and then reproduce it, that maybe 2026 we'll have a Queen Bee one by then.
Now, on the flip side, you don't have a pre-printed message. People have
No.
to write by hand.
Our postcards are handwritten. We want to show voters, many of whom have gone through a lifetime of disrespect. We want to show respect. Postcards are handwritten.
Well, of course, that unfortunately that would eliminate me. I am functionally illiterate. I learned how to type in 9th grade, and I have no handwriting whatsoever. But
Well, you know what, Harvey? You could join me at the postcard party, putting the stamps on the postcards.
okay,
We've got a job for everybody.
Well, you know, my daughter just got married, and when she was sending out the invitations, they managed to get Henry Aaron stamps.
Yes.
Which would be great in Georgia, right?
Yeah,
He played for the
they would
Braves.
be. They would be. Yeah.
So there's a
Yes,
suggestion
yes,
for
yes.
you. Well,
Yes.
that's amazing work. So how many postcards do you expect to send out in this election cycle?
12.5 million.
Oh my God. And how many phone calls do you expect to make?
That's going to be about 2.5 million phone calls, 3.5 million texts. And we really don't know how many doors we're going to be able to knock on, since canvassing is a new thing for us. So again, remember, we work with Ray, and Ray's people are on the ground in Georgia, and we've got folks on the ground now in Florida, in North Carolina, and South Carolina. And they canvass. They go out and they knock on doors in their neighborhoods, and they talk to people about voting.
Now, are your canvassers?
We haven't seen this since the Obama campaign in 2008.
Are your canvassers paid or volunteer?
They are paid.
Okay. So you've got a campaign.
We do, of course, have volunteer canvassers as well, but we try to make sure we hire college students who need the money and they get paid. We've got phone banks on 3 Georgia campuses, and normally that's the kind of thing that the girls sign up for, and then we provide them with food and beverages, if we can, from local Black businesses. And wherever there's girls and free food, there's going to be boys.
Okay. Well, that I won't take gender offense to that. I do have to agree with you on that. Okay. So tell us, where are you're in North Carolina, you're in Georgia, you're in Florida.
Right.
And Alabama.
And Alabama and Texas and Arizona.
Oh, where are you in Arizona?
There's a very small Black population in Arizona, only 68,000 registered Black voters in Arizona. And of course, most of them are in Maricopa County.
Do you canvass by or postcard by congressional district, or strictly by where BIPOC people live?
It's purely where BIPOC people live. Invariably, you are going to impact a congressional race, a state Senate race, and a state House race, because we tend to be more segregated in where we live today than we were even back in the 60s. We sort of integrated, and then it sort of all split out again.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you focus at all on the South Indian population? And Hetty Tripp, who I think is no longer on the call, has worked with a women's group of with South Indian origins.
We are really specializing in Black voters this election because there are a number of groups that specialize in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, and that is their specialty. So we give them that territory, and then our specialty is Black voters.
Ray McClendon, do you want to comment on your ongoing partnership here with Andrea Miller and Center for Common Ground?
Well, as always,
Hey, Ray.
We could not get the work done that we're doing in Georgia without the great partnership that we have with the Center for Common Ground. As many of you know, the digital platform that's proprietary to the Center of Common Ground that Andrea has created is better than in anything that we've ever dealt with before with the NAACP, with other organizations. The VAN system just cannot hold a candle to the platform that she has been able to create. And so we're just grateful for the partnership on top of the strategic leadership that she continues to provide. And so we're excited about where we are in Georgia. We know the race is tight, but with kind of partnerships we have with Andrea and the Team Unity Georgia, as we did in 2020, we think we can pull across the finish line with a victory here in 2024. Let me also say the postcarding is one of the most effective ways that we can use volunteers from outside of Georgia. As I said to Tatanka earlier, we prefer that donations be made, contributions be made, so we can use local people, local canvassers, and so forth. But with postcarding is very effective with folks from out of state. So this is very effective. We start early voting on October the 15th. So now is prime time to get these postcards done so that they can get in the mail in the next week or two and greet folks before early voting. Early voting was a key strategy in 2020, and it will be again. That's the way that you overcome all this voter purging, get people to the polls early, let them test to see if they're still on the rolls. They have times to cure their problems across the state of Georgia. You can vote at any precinct during early voting, whereas on the election day, you have to vote at your assigned precinct. So we try to get people to vote early, and this postcarding, phone banking campaigns help to push that agenda early. So we're excited about the new energy. Final thing is that one of the reasons that we need to focus on the Black population is because of the misinformation and disinformation that is targeting our Black younger voters and male voters enormously. I mean, there's a flood of negative information about Kamala Harris. It's misogynistic, it's grotesque, but that's what's going around in social media, disparaging her as a woman, disparaging her record as Attorney General and District Attorney. And these are things that we have got to overcome with messaging that comes from people that these folks trust. So that's why it's important for us to focus on that, so that these folks either A, don't stay at home, or God forbid, vote for Trump going forward.
Very interesting. Tatanka Bricka, you have a hand? Are you muted?
You're
Hold on.
muted. Unmute.
I
There we go.
wondered, thank you. Good to see you, Andrea. I wondered
Hey.
about that because I know that Elon Musk just started the social media campaign. It is going to, this unlimited money, and he basically controls that market. And it's going to go all the way through with the disinformation and misinformation and targeting Black communities. Well, the whole game is coded words for, for racism, but I can see how that will be a huge problem. It's something like, is it 73% of all people now make their decisions, especially higher and younger people, from social media? They get their news from social media. They trust social media. You have a comment
You're
on that,
absolutely
Andrea?
true.
Or
Yeah, no,
Ray?
you're true. That's absolutely correct, Tatanka. And that's why what Harris Walz did at the convention by having over 200 influencers there with credentials was so important. But with, as you mentioned, with Elon Musk and with what we just saw from the indictment that just came down with those Russian influencers, there's more that was just the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, there are many influencers in the Black community, a lot of rappers and others who are of that ilk are spreading many of these rumors, and they spread like wildfire. And so we've got to be able to attack that, get the facts and the truth out, so that we can get those folks to get reconciled to doing what is right.
So the people on this call, postcarding and money.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Again,
And telephoning.
we're going to be having a fundraiser on Sunday night, so everybody will be getting an invite to that. Andrea will be on program along, like I said, with several congressmen and some others about the state of play on the ground in Georgia.
Thank you so much from everybody in America. Thank you.
Yeah, really. Steve Caruso, Steve. Can you unmute? Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, the Twitter thing, or X, is going by the way. A lot of people are starting to get on an app called Blue Sky. In fact, more of the major media stations are doing so. CNN is just lambasting the whole thing with their posts and so forth. So there's hope out there. Elon Musk isn't the be all and the end all, and he knows it. They're just grabbing for what they can while they can, and that's usually the way it goes, isn't it? But people know better, and hopefully we'll get by this without getting too scraped up here. Thanks.
Well, Steve, you're in Ohio. Andrew, you haven't picked up on any of these cities in Ohio, right? You're still not doing that?
We do. Ohio has the same problem as Pennsylvania. Number one, we don't have anybody on the ground there. There's nobody that we know that has an organization that can work with us. These voter files are $15,000-$20,000. So we've got all the voter files we intend to buy this year. And Ohio is only 11% by or registered.
But did I understand you to say that you are working in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, or is that wrong?
We are not. No, we
You're
do
not.
not work in Pennsylvania or Ohio.
But Ray, you are. You're doing some work in Pennsylvania, is that right? Or
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Ohio's got a campaign going on with postcards. Democratic, I know, Party is doing that, and they're pretty strenuous about it. So,
well, I'm just curious. In any of these states you do work in, Andrea and Ray, are you getting any help at all from the Democratic Party?
Well, number one, the DNC does have a C3 table. With that said, no, nothing, nada, not a dime, not a word of encouragement, nothing.
And this is not new. The same thing happened in 2020.
Yeah, and 2022.
So they clearly don't believe in getting out the vote.
Well, they believe they're arrogant enough to believe that they can come into a state, bring in people from out of state, and throw sufficient money into that state through the party and accomplish what they want to. This has never worked in the Black community, never, in the history of GOTV effort. And we run into the same problem every election cycle. We're trying to convince them that the best way to increase Black voter turnout is to work with people who have been engaged with those communities, that people know that's the way the civil rights movement worked. It was based upon going into each town and hamlet, getting to know the local pastor, the local leadership of the Masons, of the Divine Nine, and gaining their commitment to be a part of whatever the leaders of the civil rights movement wanted to happen in that particular town. The Democratic Party has never embraced that. What I hope that they do not do is not to get comfortable with the overwhelming fundraising lead that they have and get comfortable with that, because we all remember what happened with Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, where he raised over $100 million and lost woefully because he did not have a ground game and he did not get involved with any of the local civic engagement organizations. And so that's the cautionary tale on saying we're raising a lot of money and we're going to spend it through different radio, TV, and other means. Not saying that this is what they're doing, but to get comfortable with having a lot of money on hand and thinking that that's going to win the election. It will not.
Yeah, well, we've been with this theme for 4 years and they don't seem to have gotten the message. They do seem to have understood some of the election theft stuff to the point that they've hired Mark Elias, which we can probably take indirect credit for, but it's mind-boggling to me. Well, they don't get a commission on door-to-door. They get commission on media buys, right? I mean,
Exactly
that's
right.
Right.
so maybe we should pay him like 50 cents for every canvasser or something. Just bribe, and we won't go there. Okay, Mike Hirsch, go ahead and invite a colleague. Mike?
Yeah, Andrea put into the chat something that she and I have discussed many times. The DNC in these big presidential campaigns are run by these consultants that make several $1 million a year. And they do that by basically going on TV and showing, giving the same vacuous answers to the same vacuous questions day in and day out, and then buying TV ads. And the people who are funding those TV ads are not at all interested in the same things that the rank and file voters are, whether they be Latino, Black, white. They have a completely different agenda. And to the degree that the Democrats are taking this money, these huge corporate donors that are bankrolling these campaigns are not at all interested in a grassroots get out the vote, because they do not trust average people. They do not want us involved in the system. They would be just as happy to lose to Trump rather than have a progressive win, which is why they were very careful not to let Bernie Sanders on the general election ballot. And this is carried out throughout all the different primaries, where Republican mega donors and crypto bros poured money into Democratic primaries to knock out progressives. They knocked out Jamal Bowman. They also redistricted him. They also knocked out Cori Bush, who was one of the most exciting, down-to-earth, get things done members of Congress that we've ever had. And they've also tried to take out a bunch of other people, and they failed because these other candidates were beloved and had done the ground game. It's just so important what Ray and Andrea are talking about. This is what works in politics. People, whether they're well-educated and well-off or not as well-educated and not well-off, they can understand and see somebody who's trying to use them. And somebody who rolls up at the last minute, a week or two before the election, every 2 or 4 years, and says, we're going to do things for you, blah, blah, blah. They don't know who they are. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know their way around town. They don't know anybody. And meanwhile, Ray and Andrea are locking into these existing social and economic structures. The Divine Nine, the Black Chambers of Commerce, the Latino churches, and the Black churches. These are structures that people trust and work with day in and day out. And that's the way you win. That's the way you energize people. And unfortunately, these huge corporations and these mega millionaires and billionaires are not interested in democracy and empowering the average American. That's inimical to what they're trying to do. And that's why it's so important to support Andrea and Ray, because they're doing it the right way.
Let me just add one thing to what Mike just said. 95% or more of the money that comes in from large donors does not care about freedom and democracy and any future way forward. They're concerned about one thing: influence. They're giving money to influence. It's like a horse race. They're making a bet on who can win, they can have influence with. Those folks that were at the New York Economic Club meeting where Trump was giving all those crazy answers, those are smart people. They know everything that he said was garbage, but they are placing a bet on a horse race, just like being at Saratoga or Churchill Downs or wherever. And they're looking, I put a bet on this race. If this bet comes in, I win and I will have influence. So we need to get out of our heads. The worst decision that the Supreme Court, even worse than Shelby, in my view, my perspective, was Citizens United, because that has made it now open season on money, so that the Elon Musks, the Thiels, all of these Silicon Valley billionaires, they don't care about democracy. All they care about is placing a bet where they will be able to be oligarchs with influence.
And Ray, they have so much money. And like you said, the Supreme Court opened the floodgates. They have so much money, they bet on both sides. So
Right.
it's a heads they win, tails we lose.
But you have to remember they are active opponents of grassroots turnout. You know, it's not just that they're, too dumb to know that if they support the Democrats, they can only win with grassroots turnout. They oppose grassroots turnout.
That's right.
They don't want it. They don't want those people, us people, voting. It's antithetical to their class interests. And I want to point out, by the way, not much talk has been about this, but J.D. Vance, it wasn't just a mistake, a random mistake that they made in terms of electoral politics. He's a tech bro, and he's there representing crypto and AI. He's not representing Ohio. He's not from OH. He's from AI and crypto, and it's no accident there. He's going to, if he got in, God forbid, he's going to pave the way for small nukes and big tech. That's what he's about. John Brakey and
I'll go real quick. I just want to underscore what you're saying there. I think it was Richard Viguerie who got up and said that, everybody wants turnout. We don't want high turnout.
Yes, that's right.
If there's high turnout, we lose. And he was one of the godfathers of the new Republican Party, where they recovered from the Goldwater disaster, where Lyndon Johnson won a gigantic landslide. And they got together with the Powell memo and a whole bunch of other things. And they said, what we're going to do is carefully plan to remake American politics from the top down. And they really did mean from the top down. And in terms of J.D. Vance, if Trump wins, Vance is going to be a heartbeat away or a Big Mac away from being the president, because Trump is not in good shape. He doesn't take care of himself. He doesn't exercise. His diet is abysmal. And he has these violent anger fits, and they'd love to have J.D. Vance there with his mad scientist scheme of small nukes to run AI and crypto mining. It's a dystopian future that these
Right.
guys, you know, they're drooling at the prospect of it.
Well, I think that JD Vance will be known as the cholesterol president, if he ever got in. We're going to quit at 4:20 like we usually do. So we got 11 minutes to go. I do want to very quickly plug that we are going to be talking more in the future about the Solartopian Olympics. Our new group is going to be called the Solartopian Olympics Committee, and we are going to be working full time in the next 4 years to make Los Angeles the LA 28 Olympic Games, followed by Brisbane in 2032, 100% solar. And that's going to be a big deal and a big project for us that I think we win. We don't want the solar brought in from the deserts and whatever. We want the solar generated on the spot. I think we're pretty clear that it's going to happen in Brisbane. Australia has become extremely pro-solar, but LA is we want to turn LA into the world's largest solar collector. And that's going to be part of our project going forward. Okay, we got John Brakey, Lynn Feinerman, Tatanka, and Vina. Go
I'll
ahead.
make it quick. Is that talking about money and how they damage us. They use weed killer on the grassroots, like groups like us who are here. Okay, and this thing with money is that Ken Bennett lost his re-election. They spent $340,000 in a state Senate race, okay, which usually never has more than 30 to 40,000. And they imported a guy from near Tucson, and you'll recognize the name, Mark Fincham, who ran for Secretary of State. And it's just the infighting. And Ken was going to be the incoming president of the state Senate. He did that 10, 12 years ago. He served 2 terms there. And but the megas had to get him out because they're, not following the rules. And then just one thing with Ray is that, you are so right about your state. My board is, listen, our board of elections is the board of supervisors, and they're paid and they're elected, okay? And they could lose their job, and they make pretty good money being a board of supervisors, okay? And so, that is a huge difference. So I really do see that you got a real problem in Georgia compared to what we got in Arizona. It's like, I used to cry because I had no shoes until I saw somebody didn't have any feet. It is that bad. I didn't realize it until now that you have, an absolute insane possible thing, because in our state, the attorney general would jump in and put the rules down, and they'd be held accountable. And you got people here who just don't care. They want to just see chaos, which could be.
Well, maybe we can get Ken Bennett to run as an independent. That would be interesting.
Well, he's not going to support Fincham, and but I don't know. It's just the whole country's bizarre. If we don't.
It is. Well, no, it's weird. Remember, it's weird. That's the word. Bizarre is too complicated.
It's really weird.
Okay, Lynn, Tatanka, and Vina, please. Lynn Feinerman, are you unmuted? Let's get you unmuted here.
Okay. Very short. If you're overwhelmed or depressed, please check out Stephen Colbert's bit about Trump and doing his igneous number, because there's also 2 small bits comparing the way JD Vance goes into a donut shop.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that.
And Ted Walz going into a donut shop. It's really hilarious.
Yeah, I just saw that. That's very cool. And also remember, if we're going to be sending postcards, we may want to start sending them to Taylor Swift, to who she has talked about endorsing Kamala. That would be a big plus. Okay, Tatanka and invite.
I just wanted to thank Andrea Miller for focusing on Project 2025, because the way I talk about Trump recently, he is the useful idiot of the smart people who are writing and implementing 2025. Just get him in for one day, and then the Office of Unfortunate Circumstances or Accidents comes in, And yeah, you can have JD Vance, you could have Tulsi Gabbard, you could have whomever serves the purpose at the moment. Those are the guys. This is the Nazi playbook. And the Federalist Society this is not new. They've been gunning for this for 40, 50 years. Well, the whole history of the country, but most recently, right? So we really need to turn out and get Andrea and Ray money and participate in the postcard campaign, because despite all this stuff that we talk about, they turn out the votes. They win. They win. They get out the friggin' votes.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Well, I'll spring for a bunch of Henry Aaron stamps in honor of my daughter's wedding.
Well, I predict we win this election and we get the help that these two need, and then a lot of other things come together and we stop the steal at every state and we win, and we will eventually have Andrea Miller and Ray McClendon on post stamps. We will.
Well, before Andrea and I get on, Sluggo, buy the John Lewis stamps, right? The John Lewis stamp is out.
Oh, yeah.
Get the John Lewis stamp.
All right, we'll do that.
Am I
Vina Colley?
unmuted?
Vina?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'm from Ohio, and I'm very disappointed in the Democrat Party that they're not trying any harder than they do for Ohio. Ohio has all these nuclear facilities here. They're killing us all. We have the highest rate of cancer here in Pike County, and no one seems to care. And so I would like to do some stuff for the Democrat Party, and I do as much as I can. But 40 years I've been here fighting this A plant in Piketon, Ohio. We have the highest rate of cancer, and now they've made us a hub for the rehab place. We have no jobs here, and they're putting all the rehabs here. And now our commissioners here, who are all Republicans, are all under investigation. The state of Ohio, that Hauser and all them are under investigation. And I think it's a good time now for the Democrat Party to come in here and do something.
Well, I will say, I just had a wonderful Facebook call with 3 of my buddies from high school, and they all wanted to go back to Ohio and work for Kamala, and they couldn't. They couldn't find anybody in the Democratic Party to accommodate people who want to come from out of state and work for Ohio to vote for Kamala. They were able to connect with Sherrod Brown, but no national party there. It's mind-boggling. The one great thing about Ohio is that Ohio has set a definite price for renting the House of the Ohio legislature. The $61 million was what it took to rent or buy the Ohio House to do $1 billion bailout, and so now we have a definite price tag. But the speaker is federal prison, and 2 of his guys have committed suicide. So it's a little bit. Oh, there you go.
Sluggo, can you rent them through Airbnb? Because it's a house.
No, I think actually it's Uber. But
okay.
What can I tell you?
How about Hertz Rent-A-Crook?
Hertz Rent-A-Crook. Well, it's very helpful.
And I have some real quick advice.
Oh, Vina, thank you so much, Vina. Thank you for joining us.
Real quick advice for Vina. If you want Democrats to help you, don't call it the Democrat Party. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's the Democratic Party. Democrat Party is something that some yokels came up with.
Right, but
every time anybody says it, they sound like a clown. So try not to say that.
You gotta, Ohio has had some great U.S. senators. John Glenn was a great U.S. senator. Howard Metzenbaum. We even had a good governor, Richard Celeste. But they are literally not running a federal a campaign for Kamala Harris, and they have a great Senator Sherrod Brown. I hate to God to think we might lose him. But they're literally, my friends could not find a way to connect to the presidential campaign in Ohio. Mind-boggling. All right, you guys, it's 4:20. We're all about to turn into pumpkins. we still have 46 people with us. It's mind-boggling. This has been another great session. Thank you, everybody. Next week, we will have Greg Palast. Ray McClendon's invited back. Andrea, you're always invited back. We're going to talk about Georgia and so much else again next week, including solarizing the Olympics. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve, for engineering, MYLA, Mike Hirsch, everybody. And pray for the defeat of Ritz Scott. If there's nothing else that happens this week, let that guy go. Okay, everybody. See you in a week. Thank you so much. No nukes.
No nukes.
Se puede.